prepare ourselves, if you just put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today. And now your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today. And now if you put your hand over your heart, your arms over your heart, and just extend them out. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today. The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that if you do not change directions, you may end up where you're heading. You know, that's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah. And I didn't make it up. That's an ancient, I'm going through a little Lao Tsu phase. So you heard the sacred reading, and this is also from Lao Tsu. If you don't change directions, you may end up where you're heading. And for some of that, excuse me, for some of that, that's good because we want to go where we're heading. We know where we're going, we like where we're going, and it's good. For others of us, we're not so sure that where we're going is the right place to go. And still others of us in this room, myself included, there are certain areas in my life where I'm sure I'm not headed in the right direction. But I don't have a clue as to how to change courses. But as always, every answer on the planet to a question in our life can be found in spiritual wisdom. It can be found in awareness of stuff you already know. Somewhere deep inside of you, you know it already. And our work is to become awareness. See, developing skill in recognizing our sabotages to our success is really critical for us. Whether it's our business success, it's our relationship success, romance success, whatever kind of success we're looking for. Developing an awareness of our saboteurs is so critical. So I'm working with a series right now called, from a book by Bené Brown called I Thought It Was Just Me, But It Isn't. Making the journey from what will people think to I am enough. I am enough. Because here is the truth. When I get up here and say you are whole, perfect, and complete, it's only as good as we can experience that. It's only good as we can feel it in our lives. And a lot of times what happens is we can't recognize the saboteurs to that. So I'm going to be talking about a specific kind of saboteur, and that's the saboteur of shame. Her premise is this: we all experience shame and we begin to stuff it down, and when we stuff it down, it leaks out into the behaviors of our lives and how we enjoy this thing called life. So now, if you were here last week, you heard me say that there is absolutely no way for us to totally avoid shame until we heal all of the aspects of our life. And that's our work, and we're going to keep working on that, healing all the aspects of our life. But in the meantime, there is some hope for us around this thing called shame, the saboteur called shame. And that hope for us is in developing what she calls shame resilience. Shame resilience. Shame resilience is when we notice when we're experiencing shame as we're experiencing it. And then we move quickly through it without taking any hostages along the way. See, because if we want to build shame resistance, we have to begin to recognize and identify what shame is in our life. Because it floods emotions through us that are so strong. It floods emotions of fear and of blame. Now, often what happens is when we don't recognize until it's happening, it's almost too late because then we've acted out. You know, we want to be the presence of Christ on the planet. We want to be the presence of God on the planet. But sometimes when our shame takes over, other stuff takes over. And we are so far away from our own divinity. I'm going to share a lot of examples with you today. One of them is about this notion of it happens before we notice it. For example, the mother whose credit card was declined. She was overwhelmed with feelings of shame and took it out on her crying child. Most of us with children are not strangers to this phenomenon. It happens in a split second. The goal is to recognize when we are experiencing shame quickly enough to prevent ourselves from lashing out to those around us. Or, as in this example, if we've already yelled at our child, we want to learn to immediately stop, calm down, take a breath, and make amends. That's our work. That's our work when we can begin to know it. So how do we recognize shame? Well, here's one of the ways we recognize shame. You pay attention to what's in your body, how your body's feeling. You know, your cheeks get red, your mouth gets dry, you have that wincing, physical feeling of wincing. You want to make yourself small. That's how you know you're in a shame moment, when you want to make yourself small so that you can kind of just disappear. When we can recognize shame, we can regain our power. We can recognize it when we regain our power right then. Brown says, and I totally, this is true for me too. She says, when she's recognizing shame in that moment, she has to get away. She has to excuse herself. She has to be alone. She's got the red cheeks. She's got the wincing feeling. She's got the ooh feeling. And she needs to excuse herself and step back so that in private, she can begin to do the things. She can cry. She can beat herself up. She can do whatever she needs to do in that moment that she's experiencing shame, but she's got to be able to do it privately. And she does that until she can return to the breath of God that is within her. Return to her own breath. After you understand your physical response, then it's time to use what Ernest Holmes calls our mind, that powerful, powerful thing of our mind. Maybe we can shut those doors, Peter, can we? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, usually it's us bothering the teens, but I think they're fighting back at us now. She says, in order to be able to use our mind, we have to do this thing called recognizing shame triggers. Those are triggers that trigger our shame. And usually our triggers were installed on us when we were little kids, when we were children, little guys. But sometimes those triggers can be installed in us when we went off to college or when we had a first marriage. Those kinds of, we can have experiences that can trigger our shame response as well. Let me give you what I thought was a really great example in the book. She talks about a woman who was in a corporate community. I'll just tell you the story. She talked about a woman in a corporate community. And in the corporate community, she did very, very, very well. And her boss had two boards outside of his door. One board was called Winners, and he'd have people's names on it who were winners in the company. And the other board was called Losers, and he'd put the names of people on the losers. Well, she was always on the Winners board, always, until one day she made a terrible mistake, and it cost the company a big client. And she went from the winner board to the loser board. And she said she felt, of course, enormous shame. She walked by and saw that name, her name on the loser board every single day. She knew other people saw her name on the loser board. And she was missing work. She was not eating. She was just gripped of shame. And we've all experienced that kind of shame at some point in our life, where it just kind of overtook our activities of daily living. Well, she was on the loser board, and she began to read some of the work of Bené Brown. And she said, I wonder if I have a shame trigger. And she realized that when she was little, she was a runner. She was an athlete in high school, and she was a very good runner. In fact, was offered a scholarship based on running. And she declined the scholarship to a very good school and went to a lesser school so that she didn't have to accept the scholarship. And she began to think, why is that? And then she realized that her father was so proud of her winning all of the races that what he did was to use the word loser a lot in complimenting her. You don't want to be a loser. Nobody wants to be a loser. And he started putting little notes on the refrigerator. Sylvia is a winner. Be a winner. Winners win. All of that. And she realized that the word loser was an absolute trigger for her. So that when it happened at her work, she realized she had to do something. And that is, she had to work for a person who didn't hold the winner-loser concept, at least so visibly as she did. So she quit her job and got another job. You see, sometimes when we get gripped in this shame and when we can begin to figure out what's going on, we have to have the courage to take some steps so that we don't keep reshaming ourselves and reshaming ourselves. One of the big hints in recognizing our shame triggers is doing what she calls getting clear about what's this concept of unwanted identities. Unwanted identities. All of us have unwanted identities, every single one of us in this room. And most of them have come out of what she calls the 12 categories of shame. Body image, parenthood, family, money, work, mental and physical health, sex, aging, religion, being stereotyped and labeled, speaking out, surviving trauma. A lot of us in this room, in fact, I would bet everybody in this room has under some category an unwanted identity that they didn't ask for, they'd like people to forget or get rid of. You know, when I was growing up, I was a tomboy, and that became an unwanted identity for me because it wasn't said in a cute little way in my family. It became an unwanted identity for me. First, because of the shame my parents felt because I wasn't feminine enough, and then because of the shame that I borrowed and put on myself because I was not feminine enough. And when the identity of unwanted tomboy was firmly established, then they went into a bull in a china shop. That was what my parents said frequently. Georgia, you are a bull in a china shop. So what happened with me, yeah, it is kind of funny, but not too funny when you're little. What happened to me was every time, and to this day, even though I've read this book, I've done the work, I know that I'm whole, perfect, and complete, even to this day, when I break something, I go into shame. It's an unwanted identity. When I can't absolutely express a way in which is gender appropriate to other people's liking, or I don't choose to express in a way that gender identified way that to other people's liking, I can often feel shame. See, now knowing this is helpful. It works to help me. See, let me. And unwanted identities are often given to us in very subtle ways that we don't know that they're happening. I love this example. Brown says, for example, in my family, being sick was an unwanted identity. We never really talked about illness. I never heard my parents say anything negative about sickness or health issues, however. I grew up believing that illness was weakness. Interestingly, my parents didn't shame us for being sick, and they were emphatic and helpful with neighbors or family members who were sick. However, they were both hard on themselves when they got sick, which was rare. When they were sick, they toughed it out. They didn't slow down. If they had surgery, they were back on carpool duty or back at work the very next day. So if you combine this upbringing with a culture that despises the sick, you can see how being a sick became a powerful, unwanted identity for me. There was never a problem until I became very ill when I was pregnant. Not only did I get sick, I was diagnosed with a pregnancy-related condition characterized by extreme nausea, vomiting, and dehydration. So there I was, throwing up every 25 times a day, unable to keep down ice chips, hospitalized for severe dehydration, and spending what little energy I had trying to figure out if any of the hospital rooms had internet access, or if maybe Steve could videotape me teaching from my bed. That way, the dean wouldn't need to bring in an instructor to take over my class. I kept telling Steve, this can't be happening. I'm tough. I don't get sick. Finally, out of frustration, he lovingly held my face in his hands and said, well, apparently you do get sick. And right now, you're not so tough. You're human like the rest of us. You really need to work through this. You're not going back to work for a couple of months. This is serious. You need to apply some of your own shame medicine right now. You know, people say to me, why would you be doing a talk on shame? That's more of a self-help kind of a talk. It's not. It's actually a very deep spiritual need that we have to be the authentic people that we are and to deal with anything that keeps us from expressing the presence of God that we are right this moment. Another unwanted identity that I hear and see often is the unwanted identity of parents who grew up in the Depression or were influenced by parents who grew up in the Depression and going into the house of children and seeing wonderful things in the house. And they often comment, well, you're getting kind of extravagant here, aren't you? It's a little extravagant looking around here. Those are the kinds of things that are unwanted identities and can really begin to make us feel shame in our lives. So is it just helpful to be aware of shame? Is it just, yes, it is. Because we become vulnerable to our shame areas. And when we're vulnerable to ourselves, that committee within us beating us down, or other people who are trying to make themselves feel better. They recognize it. I'll tell you, they'll recognize it in a minute, and they'll go right for the jugular. But once you heal it up in yourself, once you recognize it in yourself, you have greater resilience to coming right out of it and not acting from it. But understanding our vulnerability, it takes courage. It takes courage. See, most of us don't want to look at those things that we're afraid of. You know, if there's so many of us, myself included, and I think almost everybody. In fact, I don't know anybody who doesn't have some body shame. Now, if you were to stand in front of the mirror and be naked and look in the mirror, you might say, well, not exactly everything I want, but okay, all right. But then you start thinking about somebody else coming in and looking at you, and all of a sudden the shame feelings come up because you're not feeling what you think society would like you to look like. Now, the conventional wisdom would say, look, you want to stop feeling shame? Stop getting in front of the mirror. Just go somewhere else. Don't get in front of the mirror, and you'll be fine. But the problem is, it leaks out. Shame is not a private matter. It leaks out wherever we are. See, and then what happens is we try and protect ourselves from the shame. Here's an example of that. In my second year of fertility problems, I finally accepted the fact that I could not go to baby showers. We're in your early 30s, it seems like there's a shower every other weekend. I found myself going and making an ass out of myself. I would talk about how great it was to have the freedom and flexibility of not having kids. I'd ask stupid questions about the horrors of labor. The only person who knew we were trying to get pregnant was my best friend. After one particularly bad shower, she confronted me. She said, I'm being mean and not like myself. She asked me if it was about my fertility problems. When I realized it was, I had a total breakdown. She helped me through it. She also helped me understand that it was okay to not go to every single baby shower. See, the fact that she had a friend that she could go and talk to is critical in us developing shame resilience. I hope, in fact, Brown says this. She says that acknowledging your vulnerability to someone else is the only possible way to build shame resilience. Now, my hope is that each of you here have a family member or a friend that when a shame incident happens, when you're feeling the red cheeks, or you have somebody in a program that you can call and say, oh, gosh, I hope you have that person. But if you don't, remember, you are a member of the Center for Spiritual Awareness. Practitioners, please stand. These are just a few of the 20 people who understand what it means to say, I need to talk to somebody about my shame. And they're just going to listen to you. They're just going to listen to you. Thank you. Please be seated. You can talk to these folks and say, I need to just have a witness because this just happened. The last thing I want to cover this morning are things called Shame screens. Shame screens. We all have them. We're in the midst of shame. We try and escape. We want to get the heck out. We don't want to feel it. We don't want anybody else to see we're having it. We just want to get out. And here's how we do our shame screens. We either go toward it, we move away from it, or we go against it. See, when we move away from it, we withdraw, we hide, we try and make ourselves small. And I'm going to tell you that I think one of the deepest problems we have as spiritual people on this planet is making ourselves small, trying to diminish the presence of God that is within us so that we're safe. We do not have to diminish ourselves at all to be safe. The second way we do it is that we move forward toward it. We become people pleasers. Please, please like me. Please like me. Please, please, please like me. Please like me. No matter what I feel or what I think or what I'm doing, please like me. The third one is that we try and garner enough power so that we can outshame the shamer. And we get into the game. None of those will be successful in you finding that presence that is within you. Do you know why you come to church? You might think you come to church for a whole lot of different reasons, but here's why we all come to church, is because we want to feel the Spirit of God that is within us, whatever we call it, whether we call it God or Allah or Elohim or the sacred grandmother tree or any other name. We want to experience it. And in order to experience it, we're going to have to deal with our shame. So I hope you'll be back next week. We'll get further into this. We have a few books left in the bookstore. I encourage you to read along with me and follow along with me. Let's take this message into prayer, knowing that there is only one power. It's the power of love. And that love just courses through all of us all of the time, just moving through us. Our work is to not dam it up. Our work is to just let it in and let it out, let it in and let it out. For we are the beings of love. I give thanks for this. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.